Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about the power and magic of emotion, explored through the lens of astrology, divination, and art. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, Akashic Records reader, poet, and witch, and I'm here to help you feel your feels. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of season 5. And as usual, this was a pretty spontaneous decision because that's how we roll. So I decided maybe 4 hours ago that we were going to launch this season tonight. And it's like 9:30 and I'm winding down for the night after a pretty big Friday. But after I decided that Fridays were going to be for feels, it just felt perfect. And this is a night when I typically really enjoy like simmering in my feelings. And why not share that experience? So here we go. We're going to make a whole podcast series out of it. And I'm excited for you to join me. So every Friday going forward, for the foreseeable at least, I'm going to pull a card from the Reclaim Oracle deck by Little Darkness, and I'll also pull a tarot card from the Lilifer Tarot, also by Little Darkness. I love these decks together. They're really beautiful companions, and two of my absolute favorite decks. The Reclaim features single words. It's an oracle deck that focuses in on a specific emotion or like felt experience. And it has really beautiful guidebook messages that are very poetic that accompany each card. And so I'm thinking for the structure of these episodes, each Friday I'll pull the cards. I'll start off with the oracle and read you the passage from the guidebook and then move over to the tarot to integrate the message. And I'm considering the tarot as just kind of adding like extra context and juice and texture to the meaning and symbolism of the oracle cards. And, you know, like coming off of the 22 days of tarot, honestly, it was such a like vulnerable experience for me to share a lot of what I shared on the podcast. And I kind of like, I don't know, I oscillate between like, maybe that's too much. And then like, maybe that's exactly kind of what I'm here for and what I'm supposed to be doing. And typically I lean into the latter and that's where I end up landing. And sometimes I feel a little bit like shook by sharing personal stuff on a very public podcast and very public medium like this. But you know, this is what happens when you create a podcast called Feeling Loudly, is that you end up feeling loudly. Who would have thunk? So it's what we're going to continue to do. And by we, I mean me. And I'm excited for these little sessions on Fridays because I love exploring emotions. It's part of why I feel I'm here on Earth. And it's part of the sort of personal alchemy that I've done throughout my life and personal exploration. A big part of it has been embracing my emotions and honoring them and using them as fodder for creativity and for growth and for expansion and for healing. And it's been some of the deepest and most meaningful work of my life to do that and to get closer to myself through the process of doing that. So I very much am looking forward to this experience, and I'm excited for you to join me on day 1, which is appropriately a banger. And that's sort of a double entendre because today's card is lust. Just coming out hot, just coming out strong out of the gates with lust. And lust has been a big theme for me lately and one that I've been noodling and chewing on a lot. I've mentioned on the podcast a couple times that I've been celibate for like a year and a half since I ended my last relationship, and I've like made out with a couple people and it's been delicious and great. But you know, the experience of lust is a complicated one. We can lust after someone. We can confuse lust for love, maybe. We can at times get like so overcome by passion and desire that we really might lose ourselves in the process. And there's something really delightful about losing ourselves in a world that demands that we stay put and that we stay rational, and that we don't get so swept away by our desires that we end up making risky choices or, like, God forbid, living. And so it's something that I have a lot of feels about appropriately. And it's something that I think speaking of like the name of this deck, Reclaim Oracle, like I've reclaimed my sexuality and my desire a lot, especially since my health crisis during my Saturn return, when it really killed my sex drive. And like I went through a very long stretch of not desiring sex and not feeling sexy and not feeling embodied. And after that experience, entering my 30s, when my sex drive, when my sex drive kicked back on and I felt incredible lust all of a sudden, I felt like I was a teenager again after going like a year and a half with my hormones just being shot and like, you know, feeling so the opposite of desiring and lustful and sexy, and then kicking things back into high gear after that and being like, holy shit, like, whoa. And it felt like a reawakening. It really was in many ways. And so this card is interesting to me today. And I'll start off with our guidebook message and close my computer since it's making a lot of noise in the background here. Sorry. So let's start off with lust. Lust is joining forces. It's being in the body with a body, connected like an octopus, holding tight and letting go. There shall be no shame in lust, or else it is wasted. Lust is expressing love by way of physicality. It's always love, even when we don't want it to be. Even when we don't want it to be. So I'm sure people have complicated feelings about that. I'm sure people disagree with that. But just sit with that line for 1 second. It's always love, even when we don't want it to be. Because I think that for many people, maybe even all people, it's true that love can be expressed through the body in ways that the mind and the heart may not even recognize at times. And often like a loving touch or a lustful touch, when shared or directed at, I was going to say, but it sounded weird, but like when directed at someone who is the object of our affection or the object of our desire, can be very much an expression of love. And it's something that I have to play around with a lot because like I know like the love languages are complicated and whatever, but like I'm definitely someone who expresses myself with physical touch, and it's an expression of love for me. Like touch is a huge part of the way that I love and the way that I receive love and express love, and intimacy is deeply important to me in relationships. And it's something that like, you know, has shut down for me in relationships in the past when love was absent. Like I could no longer sleep with someone once I stopped loving them, or once they stopped loving me, or once the love just felt like it had dissipated and disappeared in the connection. And for me, throughout my 20s mostly, and like in my last relationship, it was really a sign to me that the relationship was breaking down when we stopped sleeping together. And when like sex became more and more absent, and when touch became more and more absent, it was like this division occurring between our souls, and our bodies were telling a story that we maybe weren't ready to listen to. And the shifts that we experience physically, like you can feel the difference in a loving touch versus a non-loving touch. And I would say if I were to make an amendment to this line, it would be that like maybe it's not always love, but it's always the presence or the absence of love is reflected in the way that we lust after someone. Like we can touch someone with affection and ardor and compassion and desire and sweetness and care. And we can also touch someone with like pure aggression and pure craving and pure like possession, as opposed to care and adoration. And it's something that I think like I know we can speak so clearly with our touch. And it's something that we can communicate so clearly with our eyes and with our hands and with our bodies. And when love is absent, you can often feel it. When love is present, you can often feel it. And something that I struggled with quite a bit in my early relationships because I have sexual trauma from sexual abuse and, being a person in this world, as many people do, I've experienced various forms of harassment and abuse. And for me, it was often really loaded, like being touched in certain ways would be activating for me. And especially since I've primarily slept with men in my life, like cis men, there's a lot of challenges around like gentleness and a need for gentleness versus a need for like aggression in like a hot way. And I would find that like I would dissociate often during sex because if someone was being too aggressive or too whatever for my taste, I would leave my body. And it was hard for me to distinguish lust from love. And it was hard for me to distinguish like safe touch from unsafe touch because in my body, my like physical experience was that a lot of things didn't feel safe. And so when I moved into my 30s and I had that whole like sexual reawakening after going a long period without sleeping with anyone, what I meant by that is like I was touching myself and I was like learning what I truly liked and learning what truly turned me on and what truly felt good. And one of the things that I noticed at the beginning of like getting reacquainted to my body is that I would automatically default to how people used to touch me instead of how I wanted to touch myself. And it was like a very complex experience to honor what I truly wanted and to even like recognize what I truly wanted. Like I would find myself at times dissociating while touching myself because I was like touching myself in a harsh way that didn't feel good to me and was actually activating. And so like that moment brought a lot of grief and I would end up like crying while I was masturbating all the time because even like the act of gentleness was very emotional for me. It was very emotional for me to be touched in a loving way. And it was something that I recognized I hadn't really experienced all that much in my life, to really be touched with love and to be touched with care and with just true adoration. And so that experience for me was very much coming home to my body and coming home to myself in a new way. And, I've had variable experiences since then, sexual experiences, like partnered experiences, some like loving and some not, and some kind of both, and a mixture and a confusing combination. And we're like not all of us, but many of us are sexual humans who like desire sex with a partner. And so there's this complexity that comes up when you have someone that you care about, but maybe things are complex emotionally between you, but you still have sex. And then maybe the sex doesn't feel loving. It feels kind of like going through the motions, or it feels like hateful, or it feels angry, or it feels sad. And all of these other emotional experiences that we have kind of end up getting embedded into our sexual experiences with partners and creating this sort of like symphony of emotions that mixes together with our bodies. And we end up expressing those emotions physically. And that can be really complicated. Like if you've ever had makeup sex, you know that like it can be complicated. Or if you've had angry sex, if you've had hate sex before, like that shit is complicated. And I remember when I was in couples therapy with my ex, we had one session where I came in and we had like recently had sex, and I just like kind of froze during sex because I actually had this moment where I was like, I feel like he hates me. And it was so felt in my body. I was like, I feel like this person hates me. This does not feel like love. This feels like hate. And it really kind of took me aback, and I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to hear it. But like he and I had a complicated relationship in the past years before where I had ultimately rejected him. And there was a lot of like leftover bitterness from that when we entered the second phase of our relationship many years later. And then there was like, it was just a very rocky relationship. And so there was a lot of resentment. And at times it felt like that really showed up within our sex in a way that was really kind of nasty and not in like a sexy way. I mean, sometimes it was sexy, but it was also like, ugh, I don't feel good. This doesn't feel like a safe experience. This feels like aggressive to the point of being uncomfortable and not like, I'm it was consensual, but it felt uncomfortable. And that was hard to rock with and hard to make peace with because sex can be very honest. Like our bodies can be very honest in a way that our words might not be, in a way that we might not be when we're not naked. And when we're stripped down, there's a level of honesty that often occurs between bodies where you can't really ignore the felt experience because you're feeling it. You're feeling someone's emotions through their body, and you're feeling your own emotions through your body. And you're recognizing the cues and the turn-ons and the turn-offs. And there's an honesty to that is very naked. And so I think it's so interesting to come back to this line. Like, it's always love, even when we don't want it to be. And how, again, it can be the absence of love, would be my little add on, my little tack on to that statement. And so I already pre-pulled a tarot card for this. And of course, the card is the Two of Cups, which is a card of love and connection and intimacy and care and adoration. And in this deck, in the Lilifert Tarot, it's two figures that are pouring cups into one another. Like the two cups are pouring back and forth between each other, and they have this like blue, purple, wavy brush stroke of paint that's going between the two cups. And it's this reciprocity, this connection, this flow, this energy and harmony that exists between two bodies and two souls. And that's like how we often want sex to feel and how we often want lust to feel. And yet, it's so often not how it feels. And for anyone else who's experienced sexual trauma, for anyone else who's experienced just like even non-loving sex, like hookups and sex with people that we don't love, you probably know that there's like just something so different about making love versus having sex. And I don't think I really knew or like understood the term making love until my first like deeply loving and caring relationship, which interestingly was the same one. Although that relationship was very complicated and very toxic at times and very messy, there was also a lot of love between us. And we had many experiences of making love where I was like, damn, that's what that is. Like, that is that feeling of surrender that comes through love making as opposed to just fucking. And it's very revealing. Again, like it's so raw, it's so revealing, and it's so intimate. And for me, at times it could be very scary, and not in the like triggering scary same way, but in the like, whoa, like this is so intense that it feels like we're being transported somewhere else. And I don't know where that other place is. And I've only kind of looked inside the box or looked at it from the outside. And there's something so transportative about this experience that it feels like I'm going somewhere so unknown yet known at the same time. And that sort of transcendent experience. And look, maybe this isn't something that everyone experiences, but like my Venus and Mars are both in Pisces. And so spirituality is inherently like laced together with my sexual experience. And so having sex that feels spiritual in nature and that feels soul driven is really important to me. And it's actually like I can't really just fuck people. Like I can't really have casual sex anymore. And that's not a value judgment or judgment of any kind on casual sex as it is. It can be fun as fuck. But like, unfortunately, it's like not something that appeals to me anymore because I've experienced sex that transported me. And it's like once you taste that, I'll speak for myself. Once I tasted that, I didn't really want anything else. And like, that's not super practical. Like, especially if you're in a relationship, like you're going to have sex. You might even have scheduled sex, which is a thing that adults have to do a lot of the time, like schedule sexual experiences and like pre-plan them and have them be not these like super organic, evolving experiences that just happen because you're so lustful for each other that you just can't not do it. Sometimes like it's, you just want to get off and sometimes your partner wants to have sex and you don't want to really, but you just like get turned on for the sake of them. And like there are all these ways that sexual experiences can play out that aren't like these divine experiences. But there is something for me about the sort of divinity that exists in that experience between two people or between however many people. Like there's something precious and sacred about that. And while I love sex and I love having sex and would like to have more sex, I also have found myself in this celibate period by choice, mostly by choice, and like lack of options that I found favorable because I needed to come back to myself again. After a relationship that really broke me down in a lot of ways, I needed to come back to my own body and to rediscover my own body and my own desire, just as I did years ago after I came off of that like very difficult health experience. And there's something about that reset of returning to the body and remembering your own touch and remembering your own desire and remembering your own urges and what turns you on and what turns you off and what makes you feel good and what makes you come and what makes you not. And like that feeling, like the texture and the pace and all of it is really sacred and very personal. And it's a language that we can learn in someone else. And like, what a privilege to be able to learn someone else's language of touch. It's such an attunement. It's such an act of care to learn someone else's body and to learn how to touch someone else so that they feel good. And that sort of reciprocity is very Two of Cups. Like the pleasure, the incredible pleasure that you can gain from giving pleasure to someone else is very Two of Cups. It's like, as I pour into your glass, I also pour into mine. Or as I pour into your glass, you also pour into mine. And it's, I think, no coincidence that the Two of Cups is actually connected to Venus in Cancer, which is represented by the 69 symbol. And like what an act of love 69 is. Like mutual care and mutual service and mutual love and mutual touch is such an act of devotion and love and care and reciprocity. And to me, that's sort of like the ultimate act of love, is like one that is giving as you are receiving and receiving as you are giving. And it feels like so perfect that this is the card that comes up, the Venus in Cancer card. Like, as I care for you, I also care for me. And I think like the word lust can be really loaded for people because of that idea that like love is not lust or lust is not love. And that if someone is lusting after you, that they see you as an object or they see you as like a thing to be conquered or, conquest, whatever. And that's like this objectification inherently that renders you like not like a lover, but more of just like an object. And that's true in many cases. Like we are objectified, we are sexualized without our consent and made into objects of desire who are not cared for. Unfortunately, that's like a very common reality. And what a fucking beautiful experience when we get to have both, when we get to be loved and lusted after and desired and cared for all at the same time. And when we get to lust after and love and desire and care for someone else at the same time. I decided to do shufflemancy for these episodes because I love that. And I think it just brings up like so much more juice when we get these songs. And the song that I got for tonight was Someone New by Banks, which is a really beautiful song. And I'm just going to read you some of the lyrics, not all of them. And I'll, as usual, link the song in the notes below. And I'll also be adding a playlist for this season. So if you want to go follow that playlist, you can get all of the songs that I include in the episodes for season 5. But this song, again, it's called Someone New by Banks. And it starts with, I can love you desperately, though your love ain't guaranteed. Oh, I wish you knew the deal, gotta learn from far away, and I simply needed space. Space for me to be, and I think you need it too, though I know you call me selfish for assuming I did this for you too. You still got me round your finger, even though I'm far away. Please believe me when I say everything I do, I'm gonna think of you. Don't know what else to do. You got me, you got me. Everything I make, I only make for you. Baby, be patient for me, and please don't fall in love with someone new. I promise one day I'll come back for you. You say you hate me now, and you burn me with your words, calling me a fool, saying that I've fucked up everything, and you'll never forgive me, though I'm doing this for you. Can't you see if there is such a thing of loving someone so much that you need to give them time to let them breathe? But you don't understand. I wish you understood. I hope one day you do. Everything I do, I'm going to think of you. Don't know what else to do. You got me. You got me. And there's more, and you can go listen to it if you want to. But I thought it was interesting that the song is playing with the complexity of both love and hate and how the intensity of those feelings can often coexist. And people always say, like, that true lovelessness is indifference. Like if you're indifferent towards someone, that's more of a representation of a lack of love than like hatred sometimes, because love, like intense love and passion, can often morph so quickly into hatred in especially volatile situations. And, there's that effect sometimes where instead of loving someone, sometimes we choose to hate them. Sometimes anger is a replacement for love. And then again, we see that play out in these sexual experiences where people end up having hate sex and like makeup sex that's like really intense. And, that can be fun too. But like this swip swap that we do often, like you've hurt me and I love you. And so now I hate you. Or like I hated you a second ago, but now I love you. And this like really intense passion and intensity that can come around in romantic or sexual relationships, and how sometimes we do need to like air out, like this song about taking space, like space for me to be, and I think you need it too. Got to learn from far away. There's this desperation that comes through in this song that it feels like could only be like cooled by space and by taking space. And that was very much my experience in taking space for myself and retreating into myself after a breakup and needing to go inward and needing to not be touched, even though I wanted it so badly and still do. But like, there's also this deep need to be given space to find the body again and to find the self again. And so I think this combo is just lovely. I'm loving this little like trifecta of lust, the Two of Cups, and the song Someone New. And I don't really know how I'm going to end these podcast episodes yet. Maybe in the future I'll have something profound to end on, or I'll share like a poem or a quote or something. But for now, it just feels right to say that your lust is valid and it's not dirty. It's not gross. It's not bad. And when we experience lust, it can be like such a strong sign that something within us is activated and that fire within us has truth to it. And that even if we don't act on it, which we often can't act on our lust or don't want to, that reveals truth. And for people especially who are contemplating their sexuality and their gender and all of these pieces of their identity, it can be so empowering to explore your lust and to let it be, to let it speak to you. that, not coincidentally, is what I was going through during that post health crisis sexual reawakening myself, was like realizing that I was bisexual. And that happened as I was approaching my 30s. It was late in life. And realizing I was bisexual and that I'd been like suppressing these desires for my whole life was so revealing. I realized that I had a lot of issues with women, like cis women, in part because like I wanted to fuck many of them and like I wanted to like kiss many of them. And because I was suppressing that desire within myself, it got expressed in these like messy ways where instead I felt like jealousy or envy or anger or dislike. And of course, that's not true across the board. Like, I didn't want to like sleep with every woman that I disliked, but there was a definite trend in feeling like intimidation or jealousy or dislike toward women I was attracted to because I was trying to kill something within me unconsciously because of my own religious programming and all of that bullshit, and because of society. And so coming into my sexuality around that time was huge and so empowering. And my issues with women began dissolving rapidly when I started owning that I just wanted to sleep with a lot of them and that I was just attracted to many of them. And being able to embrace that and own the beauty of that was so freeing. And so our lust can set us free, and it can also fuck us up, and it can get us into some really sticky situations, but it can very much set us free, even if it's not acting on it and pursuing it, if it's just the simple recognition that it exists. So I will leave you there. Thank you for joining our first spicy episode of Friday Feels. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are interested in submitting questions for our monthly AMA episodes that I'll be hosting on the first Friday of every month going forward, you can submit a question via the little Spotify link in the description at the bottom. You can send in a voice note. You can also answer the question if you're in Spotify. If you're listening to this on Spotify, there's like a little question submission option. And as I mentioned in my season 5 trailer, I'm also going to be launching a new podcast for my patrons on April 10th, and it's called Four of Wands. And you can sign up for my Patreon for as little as $6 a month and enjoy those podcast episodes, which will be getting pretty intimate and exploring the Akashic Records and tarot and doing weekly like astro weather check-ins. So a lot of good stuff on those. And I'll probably release some like non-subscriber episodes too, maybe like one a month or something, just to give people access to some content there without becoming patrons too. So go follow the Four of Wands podcast, and I will also link that below. And then you, if you're interested, can also just become a patron to support my work. I just released a new pick a card reading today for all tiers, focusing on how to ground and move through collective grief. And that one is live as of tonight. I also publish monthly Akashic forecasts and tarot forecasts for every zodiac season. And you get discounts on readings with me, and you get access to private Discord channels and a lot of other good stuff at the higher tiers. So it's a beautiful way to support this podcast if you do enjoy my work and you want to support me, which helps a lot. And of course, you can always book a reading with me too, and follow me on social, even though I'm offline this month, and sign up for future events and all that stuff. So if you do gain value from this podcast and you like it and you dig it and you enjoy me, I would love that. It means a lot to me. It's super helpful. And even just like rating this podcast or leaving a comment or review is all really, really supportive, as well as sharing it with your friends who might like it too. So that's the end of my promo. I love you guys. Thank you for being with me through the 22 Days of Tarot Challenge if you listened in, and for joining me as I embark on a new season exploring lust and some maybe less tantalizing emotions in future episodes. All right, take care, y'all. Talk soon.